So next, we are pleased to welcome Joe Doss, President and CEO of the International Bottled Water Association. Joe has served as President and CEO of IBWA in Alexandria, Virginia since 1999. Mr. Doss has extensive experience in association management and food and drug, government affairs, public relations, and legal issues. He has a proven track record of strategic thinking and planning, managing complex and controversial issues, and building consensus among diverse, large and small member companies. His previous positions include Senior Vice President and Director of Public Affairs, Consumer Healthcare Products Association, formerly the Non-Prescription Drug Manufacturers Association, Counsel at the law firm of Covington and Burling, Assistant General Counsel and Director of State Government Relations, the Consumer Healthcare Products Association, Government Affairs Representative for the National Stone Association, and Legislative Analyst at Legislate of Congress. Mr. Doss has a BA in Government from the College of William and Mary and a JD from George Mason University School of Law. He has completed an executive management course at the Center for Creative Leadership. Mr. Doss is a member of the Bar in Virginia and the District of Columbia. He serves on the board of directors at the International Council of Bottled Water Associations and is a member of the Food and Drug Law Institute and the American Bar Association. Welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you very much, Jillian. It is great to be here with all of you. I'm sorry it can't be in person. I've really enjoyed the meeting so far, yesterday and today. Very interesting, and thank you, Jillian and Jennifer and Tara, for putting on such a good program. And I think I've said this before, I've always held a very special place in my heart for NEBWA and its meetings. It was the first meeting that I ever came to when I first joined IBWA. So I was very warmly welcomed and appreciated it. It's good to see some of the same people that I met many years ago still involved at NEBWA. So glad to be here and looking forward to giving you some thoughts on what IBWA does and some of the issues we're following both on a national and a regional basis up in the Northeast. Are my slides up and ready to go, or can we put them up?
Yes, give me 1 second and I'll pull your slides up.
Okay, thank you. And let's see if I can move them. Well, I'm not able to move them so far. Let's see if I can do it with my mouse.
You just have to accept it. I just set over a control your screen and you should have control.
Okay, it says you can control view options. I don't see where it's going to say I can take over, but give up remote control, use my keyboard layout. Let's try that. I've got that on, which is what I want to do. I want to use my keyboard and it's not working. I cannot make it move either with
It should pop up on your end, Joe, to accept control of the screen.
Yeah, yes, he has control.
Well, it says you are controlling Jennifer's screen, but I am not controlling it. I guarantee you that. It won't work either on my mouse or on my up and down buttons on my computer.
It's, we're not touching it. There you go. We're not touching it. You're controlling it.
It must be delayed then. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes there is a small delay.
There we go. Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Okay, we're good.
Good enough. So I thought I would first give you a little bit of a background on IBWA, who we represent, what we do. We were founded in 1958. We represent the entire bottled water industry. We're not just for big companies. We have, see, it's taking over. It's, hold on, it's got a way lagging. It will not go back.
Yeah, I gotta redo it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have an option. I can I can pull it on my own screen and use it, and it won't even matter whether you give me control over it or not. Okay.
Go ahead, I'm gonna allow you to control the screen. You
Well,
can share your screen, and then you should be good to go.
well, that's okay. I've just pulled it up on my own computer, and I'll just control it. Can you, oh, well, that's right. Then you can't see me pull it through. All right.
Can you just wiggle your screen, hit the share screen green at the bottom,
Yep, there we go.
choose the slides you wish to share
Yep.
on your screen, and you
Yep,
should be
there we
good to
go.
go. There
Yep.
we go.
All right, let's try this again. There we go. Good. All right. Anyway, back to the IBWA. So we are for not just for big companies. We're both HOD, small pack. We're spring water, artesian water, purified water, all different types of products. And importantly, we have 60% of our bottlers are small companies, and that 60% by number have gross annual sales of less than $2.6 million, which is small no matter how you look at it. The services we provide are in different areas: science, technology, regulatory, communications, government relations, environmental sustainability, and education. And certainly believe that there is a very good return on the investment for the membership. And as I mentioned, we provided activity in federal, state, local, regulatory, and legislative compliance. We have a weekly newsletter that keeps you up to date on what's going on in the industry, updating you on key issues with special bulletins. And importantly, you have access to IBWA staff for technical GR communications, environmental questions. You know, Bob Hurst and Al Lear, there for technical questions. And they have seminars, webinars, and we also have a members only website with a lot of good information that will help you run your businesses. We have a plant inspection program. That's very important. Make sure that your plant is operating at its best capacity and best safety, quality, helps you prepare for an FDA inspection. We have a certified plant operator program, the convention and trade show, some member-only events, and we have information that you can get from networking with and learning from other bottlers, and that's key, particularly for smaller companies. We have a candidate bottler program for those companies that aren't quite ready yet to meet either FDA or IBWA's code of practice. We bring you in as a candidate. We help you get ready to comply with all the regulations, and we have consultative inspections and reduced dues for the candidate program. So the big issue these days, obviously, throughout the year has been COVID-19, and certainly it has caused unprecedented challenges for the bottled water industry. From the very start, IBWA has been working hard to try to provide the members with the information that they need to conduct their businesses. We continue to send regular bulletins to members to make them aware of FDA, CDC, OSHA guidances on requirements for offices and food facilities. We immediately made sure that bottled water as part of the nation's critical infrastructure, and that the companies that make bottled water, their employees are considered essential workers. And we in fact provided members with a model letter for their employees and truckers to use when going to and from work during those restricted travel times early on in the pandemic. We also worked with the American Trucking Association to make sure that the trucks could still operate, and we were finding that restrooms and rest areas were shut down. So we got working on that, got them reopened. We also got the truck weight limits with other allied business groups, both at the federal and state. We got the truck weight limits increased. We've published a COVID handbook for our members. It includes all the CDC guidances, the OSHA information, everything that we could find that was pertinent to making sure that the companies had information that they needed to operate their facility and their offices safely during the pandemic. And the pandemic book, it is updated regularly, and we continue to try and give the information to our members weekly or even twice weekly if new stuff comes in through the splash. And we've also been working hard. There's a lot of legislative activity going on at the federal level, including business loans, payroll tax deferrals, pension payment deferrals, general tax provisions. We've been involved with larger coalitions to try and push some of those provisions that would help companies, both small and large. We've also created a webpage about COVID. It's the first thing you see when you open the IBWA website. Got a lot of good information on there, open to the public, and there's a lot of good resources if you want to know which states are open and what state proclamations have been made and executive orders about COVID. They're all on there through links through the U.S. Chamber, the National Association of Manufacturers, and other groups that IBWA works with. So one important thing that happened when the country started opening back up, we did note that there was a CDC reopening guidance for workplaces that suggested that coolers be removed from the workplace. And yet the interesting thing was it was allowing water fountains, which made no sense at all. So IBWA immediately sent a letter to the CDC challenging their guidance and provided them with the facts about the safety of water coolers. And at first, CDC didn't pay attention to us. So we then wrote to the Secretary of the Health and Human Services Department. And after that, we did see that CDC removed the reference to water coolers in their most recent versions of their guidance document. So we were very glad to see that. And there have been states that are also opening up and issuing their own guidances for what offices need to do when they reopen. And Kentucky issued one that was vague and confusing about whether water coolers could or could not be used. So we basically worked with, again, some of our state allies, the State Kentucky Chamber, contacted the governor's office, and they issued a statement basically saying that water coolers were in fact allowed and were something that they considered important to providing water to offices and other businesses. So we kept an eye on that. If you see any of that going on in your part of in your state, let us know, because there is ample information to show that water coolers should still be allowed to be used during the pandemic. So we thought I could provide you a couple of ideas of what we do at IBWA and how it can help you. We've got a lot of information still focused on complying with FSMA, the new FSMA regulations. We've got guidance documents, training sessions, workshops. Bob, you can call Bob. And you know, basically you have now under this mandatory inspections on a regular basis by FDA or a state agency. And if your plant fails an inspection or needs to be re-inspected, it could be quite costly. I think Chris Dunn or someone else yesterday was talking about that, and it could cost up to $20,000 to have FDA come back and have to reinspect your plant. We also keep you up to date on the emerging contaminants. In particular, recently it's been PFAS, and we've been watching that for many years. We did note that in 2019, there was a non-IBWA member company in Massachusetts that sold bottled water with high PFAS levels, and the state recalled their product. And immediately afterwards, that company lost most of its major customers. It was a family-owned company, been around for 100 years, and they went out of business as a result of this. So I'm not saying they wouldn't have had a problem with PFAS if they had been an IBWA member, but I think they would have at least known about it several years before that. And of course, every year we see bills introduced in state legislatures that impose unnecessary labeling requirements for bottled water products or that are different from the current FDA regulations. And obviously the cost to comply with these requirements is great. We put a burden particularly on small companies. You know better than I what the cost is to design, layout, and legal review for a new label if you had to do it. But it gets very expensive. So basically, we oppose any state labeling requirements that are different from or in addition to what the federal government requires under the FDA regulations. Now, if your company were to ever experience a recall or some other event that would place your business in a spotlight that's negative, IBWA has helped our members with that in the past with questions from media. We've got position papers that we provide. And sometimes it's better to have an association respond to an issue rather than have it be just about your company. So we're glad to do that to try to be the focus of the attention rather than the company. And we can also provide technical support. There have been occasions within, say, the last 3 or 4 years where state regulators were going to require a company to recall their product. And IBWA was able to, through our contacts with FDA, have FDA contact the state regulators, and it prevented recalls. So that was very important for the company to have that help in making sure that their product was not recalled. And there are now a number of states that are seeking to ban the sale of bottled water, to impose taxes on bottled water, or prevent companies from being permitted or re-permitted. And the aim of these is often at large companies, but they impact all bottled water businesses, small, medium, and large. When they're basically saying no more spring water permits, that applies to everybody, or re-permitting. So it's not just the big companies. So these groups are becoming more organized and coordinating their actions. So we're basically trying to oppose them everywhere we can, and we've been pretty successful thus far with the help of the members in stopping them. And as you know, we continue to be attacked unfairly with false claims about the bottled water industry. And they have stated that their goal is to put us out of business. So we make sure we stay up and abreast of all the issues that related to bottled water. We take proactive and defensive actions, and we try to educate legislators, regulators in the media, consumers, and opinion leaders about the very small environmental impact and the way that bottled water companies are good stewards and how they are good for their community. We also conduct research and prepare studies that help provide data to support our positions. And we, excuse me, we basically have the messages that bottled water is safe, healthy, convenient. Any efforts to discourage consumption are not in the public interest. We use very little water. It's 0.01% of all water in the United States, 0.02% of all groundwater withdrawals. We only make up 1/3 of 1% of the waste stream. And, you know, we're okay with efforts to reduce the environmental impact of packaging. We just want it to apply to all consumer goods and not be the only target. Now, we have said before that, as I mentioned, that we're doing some studies. It's important that we have these so we can push back against the false claims. So we've done studies particularly about our water use and energy use, because people say we're using all the water, taking all the water out of the aquifers. So we've got a study that basically points out that only 1.39 liters of water is needed to make a liter, and that includes the liter that is consumed. And then we have very low energy, 0.24 megajoules per liter of bottled water. All bottled water containers, of course, as you know, are 100% recyclable. And we've also done research concerning curbside recycling and the recycling of bottled water products. So each year, NEBWA conducts research for IBWA. Recently, they've shown that up to 55% of curbside is made up of bottled water, which is very good. I think the carbonated soft drinks is only at about 18% of curbside. And we're working with our partners at Keep America Beautiful, the Recycling Partnership, to educate consumers about the importance of recycling. And as I mentioned before, FSMA, we try to keep you apprised of that through bulletins, and we continue to do that. I mentioned PFAS earlier. It has become very high profile. It was talked about yesterday. And we've now got EPA's 70 part per trillion health advisory limit. It's not an MCL. And in some states, actually, when there have been high levels of PFAS in the public health, in the public water systems, the state has actually pointed to bottled water as something consumers can turn to help them. IBWA's board approved our standard of quality for PFAS at 5 parts per trillion for any single PFAS compound and 10 parts per trillion for 2 or more compounds. And there has to be annual testing. We've also written FDA a letter urging them to establish a national standard for PFAS. We think it's very important to have one standard throughout the nation, and we want FDA basically to preempt any other current or future state regulations. And right now there are several states that regulate it, some of which apply to bottled water. In those states that regulate bottled water as they do public water systems, New York, New Jersey, we are subject to those requirements. And we're working with Congress trying to enact legislation to require FDA to issue an SOQ for PFAS. FDA basically turned us down when we asked them to issue a standard. They basically said they're going to wait until EPA gets around to issuing one for tap water. And that will be several years from now. And in the meantime, more states will get involved and probably set their own PFAS standards. So we're trying to make sure we're pushing for a national uniform standard for PFAS. Bisphenol A, it is still an issue. There's a lot of information that's out there that's negative about PFAS, about BPA, and we continue to strongly defend it. And we oppose any legislation to ban or restrict BPA. I know many of you in the home and office area, they're still using polycarbonate bottles, which do have BPA in them. So it certainly would be very costly if you had to replace all of those bottles. So if a bill is going to pass, and we haven't seen one in a long time that did pass, IBWA seeks a bottled water exemption. And of course, if that were not possible, we'd seek a very long-term effective date so you could sell through some of your product. There was a bill in Virginia this year that would have banned the sale of bottled water containers with BPA. And we hired a lobbyist and we were able to defeat that legislation. A lot of this sometimes just is really with BPA. There'll be a story about BPA and there'll be a picture of a PET bottle with that story in the media, on the internet or print. So we spend a lot of time going to the people that have published the article saying you've got a PET bottle there next to a BPA article, and that's just not possible. But we also then, of course, talk about the safety of BPA. But we see a lot of that, and we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that people have the correct images and hope that they learn that it's not in a small pack. We do see each year legislation in states that will either seek to enact new bottle deposit laws or modify the current deposit programs. And so we have in recent years seen the need for more bottle grade recycled material. And so as a result of that, IBWA recently revised its position on bottle deposit bills. We used to oppose them. And now we basically support provisions that will make existing bottle deposit laws more effective, and any new bottle deposit legislation, if they have the same sort of provisions in them, we could support. So it's been introduced in several states, and there has been a federal bill introduced on this issue as well. And we have a new position, as I mentioned, that focuses on a few key issues. We want to help eliminate fraud, reduce contamination, have reasonable handling fees, have effective program administration, and we want those unclaimed deposits to go back into the recycled program for the state. We're also seeing a lot of activity on recycled content legislation. Several states considering it. California just passed a new law that requires the use of recycled content for all beverage containers, including bottled water. The industry and IBWA supports mandatory content requirements, but they have to be reasonable and attainable. And the proposals, as they all start out, are very unreasonable. They seek unattainable mandates and unreasonable compliance dates. Most of them start out at 100% recycled content by 2035, and there's just simply not enough recycled material to meet those unreasonable requirements. So in addition to changes in the content rates and the effective dates, there are also IBWA attempts to make changes in penalty amounts, safeguards, reporting requirements, local preemption. We want to make sure that if a state enacts a recycled content requirement, that cities, towns can't also have their own different standards and requirements. California's bill that was recently enacted, it is 15% recycled content by 2022, 25% by 2025, and 50% by 2030. And as I mentioned, as introduced, it would have required 100% by 2035. Now, we don't love the bill, but we were able to prevent the legislation from being a whole lot worse. And we think there are some safeguards in there that if we can show and demonstrate that there is not enough plastic recycled material to go around, that we might get a waiver on the requirements. So as you know, what happens in California is often copied by other states. Thus far in 2020, there have been bills introduced in Maine, New York, New Jersey, and Washington. We expect to see other bills introduced in the states in 2021. And we're also seeing a lot more of the extended producer responsibility legislation at both the state and federal level. And some of those measures include recycled content provisions. Now, microplastic, it continues to get a lot of attention from the media and government. And bottled water is obviously always singled out as a major source, incorrectly singled out as a major source of microplastics. We've formed a working group at IBWA to review the strengths and weaknesses of available testing methods based on public available studies. And the group has identified 2 detection methods for analysis of microplastic that seems to be very effective for bottled water. We're coordinating our efforts with the European Federation of Bottled Water, and they are working with the academic community to develop laboratory protocols for conducting the testing from the sampling through the reporting. We understand that they are basically having a peer-reviewed journal publish something very soon that talks about all of those issues, how it should be sampled, what the reporting should be. So we basically try to reply to any media reports by noting that there are thousands of other food and beverage products that use plastic, not just bottled water. But we also focus them on the fact that microplastics are found just everywhere, in the soil, in the air, in the water. And furthermore, right now, there's no scientific consensus on testing methodology or potential health impacts of the particles, of microplastic particles. I think I was mentioning yesterday, excuse me, that I learned recently that in other countries, excuse me, get a sip of water. In other countries that have looked at this issue, Canada, for instance, I think they've set a 600. No, I'm sorry, I'm conflating the issue again. I'm sorry, I keep confusing those two. So anyway, federal focus on plastics. There is a bill in Congress now to ban the sale of bottled water in national parks. We testified in opposition to the bill in February, and several members of Congress support a bill seeking to impose extended producer responsibility for all plastic food and beverage containers. And there is a nationwide bottle deposit program and recycled content mandate in that bill. And so we're following those very closely. The dietary guidelines for Americans, that is an important topic for us. We're trying to make sure that the 2020 dietary guidelines continue to recognize the important role of water in a healthy diet. We've provided input through the dietary guidelines process. We've submitted oral and written comments on the dietary guidelines to the advisory committee, and we have submitted comments on the scientific report that was issued by the advisory committee. And we're basically seeking also to have water added to the MyPlate nutrition guide. That MyPlate guide and graphic provides important information to adults, parents, caregivers, and children, and it serves as an educational tool for health professionals and government agencies. So it would be very important to have water on the MyPlate. This is an example of what we would like to see. Right now on the MyPlate, there is dairy, and we're very careful to point out that we want to keep dairy on the MyPlate because dairy industry is a very powerful lobby. So we're very certain to say we want dairy on, but we also want water to go on. And we have created this graphic that we provide when we're talking to HHS, USDA, and others about this. We've also gone to Congress and had several members of Congress support having water on the MyPlate. And one other thing about the MyPlate, it's interesting, and this is work that Jack West will be familiar with, is IBWA belongs to the International Council of Bottled Water Associations. And through that membership in that group, we were able to put together a document that points out that there are 48 other countries throughout the world pagoda, or some countries are still using the pyramid. 48 other countries are still using or have water in their nutrition guidances. So we have taken that document, given it to USDA, and they were very impressed by that. So we're hopeful that that might make a difference this time around when asking them to include water on MyPlate. So let's talk about a few activities that we're involved in the NEBWA region. First of all, throughout the country, IBWA has monitored more than 1,000 bills in 50 states this year. It says last year, but it's this year. And we've tracked another 400, more than 400 regulations that would affect the bottled water industry. Some of the things in your region includes Maine, which had a bill that would have with a mandatory recycled content for plastic bottles. It was 25% by 2026, 30% by 2031, quite reasonable when compared to some of the other bills we've seen. We provided comments with our concerns and worked with state allies to seek to amend it to a study issue, and that's what happened. And the bill basically, though, did not advance because of COVID. We've seen a lot of states basically where once COVID hit, they either shut down or they turned their attention solely to COVID-related legislation. In Massachusetts, and you're probably very well aware of it, there have been several Cape Cod communities recently voting to ban the sale of single-use plastic water bottles, along with other single-use plastic items. They were originally scheduled to be addressed during the Springtown meetings, but they were canceled and postponed because of COVID. So probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, there were several ordinances passed in these small towns at the town meetings. We've tried to work with the Massachusetts Beverage Association and Mass Food Association to oppose them. But as you know, it's very difficult. These are town meetings. There are no individual legislators that you can talk to. Everybody can come to the town meeting and vote on the proposals. And quite frankly, some of them are just civics projects by high school students in some cases. But there's been a more organized effort in the Cape Cod area recently to get these enacted. In New Hampshire, there was a bill basically would have required that bottled water be tested for the presence of certain chemicals and then labeled with results of those tests. Specifically, if there were any PFAS, arsenic, or MTBE, you would have had to have a label that indicated that. And we were able to get the bill amended basically to require bottled water to meet the same standards that the state has set for public drinking water, which in turn are basically the same as what has been adopted at the federal level for bottled water. So we felt that was a good outcome with that, rather than have to have a state requirement to require the bottled water be labeled for those substances. The bill did fail to advance, I think again, COVID, but it's been pre-filed for the 2021 session. In New Jersey, there is a bill there, and it's continuing to be considered, which would establish recycled content mandates for plastic, glass, and paper packaging. The mandates are 10% within 2 years of the bill's effective date, 25% within 5, and 50% within 10. Roughly, it's the same as California, with the exception that California was 15% rather than 10 within that 2-year period. So there are still concerns we have with the bill, particularly because it deals with per container basis rather than on the aggregate when measuring and determining whether you are in compliance with the mandates. And that would be very difficult to do on a per container basis. And of course, the penalties are also based on a per container basis there, and we don't want to see that. I understand that there have been recently some negotiations on this, and that they will see a bill coming out very soon that will have compliance measured in the aggregate rather than on a per container basis. And in Pennsylvania, we continue our work to try to shift oversight of bottled water production from the Department of Agriculture to the Department of Agriculture, and have DEP only be responsible for oversight of sources. As you know, those of you who may do business in Pennsylvania, bottled water in sizes up to, it says 1 gallon, it's half gallon, not 1 gallon, are regulated by the Department of Agriculture, and products over half gallon are regulated by DEP. And so some companies have their products regulated by both agencies, which does not make any sense. It's duplicative and unnecessary. And quite frankly, it's the Department of Agriculture that has the expertise about food products, which bottled water is, and it is the Department of Agriculture that regulates all other food products in Pennsylvania. So we're trying very hard to get it done this year, but COVID has sidetracked a lot of things in many states, and that includes these bills in Pennsylvania. We're going to see what we can do to get it done, but it's going to be tough. And if it doesn't get passed this year, it'll have to be reintroduced next year. So a little bit about our work with state and regionals. We continue to work closely with all the state and regional bottled water associations on legislative regulatory issues that impact bottled water. We do researching, preparing and presenting testimony and comments on state bills and regulations. Staff are available to participate in legislative hill days that are organized by state and regional associations, and we have done that. We continue to approve CEU credit for educational seminars given by non-IBWA staff at state and regional association meetings. And we also have a state and regional association committee at IBWA, which is an important forum for sharing information around the country on legislative, regulatory, and other developments at the various regions and states. We also host federal and state legislative fly-ins. They've become virtual recently to meet with lawmakers. It's still important, even though we can't get meetings with lawmakers and on person-to-person basis, we still need to maintain those contacts. And until we get back to in-person meetings, we've got Zoom, and it's an effective way to educate legislators and help influence policy. So plant tours have also always played a critical role in helping you explain to legislators and regulators about your companies and the issues important to your companies. And so we're going to try and see if we can also have some virtual plant tours. And that's how they learn firsthand about how you do business. So we hope we'll be able to start those up pretty soon. I will say that we need help, IBWA does, from non-members. We allocate more than $750,000 annually to address government relations issues at the federal, state, and local levels. Our activities benefit the entire bottled water industry, including non-members. And to be most effective, we need to have assistance from non-member companies. So ideally, we'd like all non-members to be members of IBWA and be part of the discussions and decision-making on key issues. But we also appreciate it if you could support our efforts by providing grassroots support, which you do, which is very important. And we appreciate that. And perhaps contributing money to help offset some of our expenses. And this is just a map that contains some of our expenses. We spend about $375,000 on state council throughout the country. We have also federal lobbyists that we hire. We've got regulatory monitoring services, economic data that we have that helps us in the state show the value of bottled water companies to the economy of the various states. Any state you're in, we can give you information about what the value of the industry is to the overall economic health of that state or congressional district. Talk a few minutes about communications. Obviously, a key factor in promoting our industry and defending it is the ability to communicate the facts to key audiences. And our audiences are the media, consumers, legislators, regulators, and other opinion leaders. We use a variety of methods to get our messages across. Media toolkits, traditional newspapers and magazines, news websites, blogs, and more, of course, it's on social media. It's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and podcasts. That's clearly where the shift has gone. So we have a strong presence on several social media platforms. We've got 49 YouTube videos, more than 1 million total views for those videos. We've got 3 Twitter feeds, more than 5,600 followers. I think that number is now up to 6,000. We've got 2 Facebook pages with more than 8,000 likes. We've got Instagram and Pinterest pages. And we now have podcasts. There are podcasts, and we've produced 10 to date on various subjects. So we use all of these platforms in a coordinated strategy to help correct the misinformation and help educate consumers and others about the facts about bottled water. We monitor websites, constantly making sure that we're pushing back and engaging in conversations with key bloggers, environmentalists, parents, college students, making sure that we get back to them. If they've posted some incorrect information, we try to correct the record. And we have noticed recently that because of COVID, there has been a lot of stockpiling of water. So, you know, basically, I think that it's been more positive, let's just say, about bottled water recently than it has been negative. I think we were the go-to product as soon as COVID hit. People are used to buying bottled water. And so we saw a drop in negative social media activity about bottled water, which is good. I think people are more appreciating plastic containers generally and the safety that they provide. So we've got two websites, bottledwater.org. That's our main primary website, sort of media and public facing. It's got a lot of facts and data on it, and we're revising it. It's getting a new look. So I think it should be up and going pretty soon. Also, bottledwatermatters.org, would encourage you to go to that. There's a lot of our YouTube videos and other links to other of our media assets there. And that would include our Put It in the Bin waste campaign, which we are promoting with some of our partners, trying to make sure that people put their bottles in the bin, making sure that they're recycling. It's very important. And we have help with those messages, amplifying our messages. Our groups like Keep America Beautiful, NAPCOR, Recycling Partnership up in the Northeast, the Northeast Recycling Council, and our members. We're very appreciative of having your help in getting those messages out. I want to talk a little bit just quickly, and almost done with my presentation. I think we'll be done on time, about our upcoming virtual annual business conference and trade show. It's November 9 through 12. The registration is now open. We have educational sessions with an interactive format that will include live question and answers. There'll be, I believe, up to 15 CEUs available. We also have a virtual trade show exhibits with the ability to make appointments with service and product providers. You can hear about key legislative regulatory activity, learn about business issues, sales, and basically see how IBWA works. So we're hopeful, and we are getting a lot of people, additional people registering for the meeting because there is no need to travel. You can stay at home. There's no lodging, no food, no other related expenses. So would certainly encourage you to attend and participate if you can. And lastly, just want to say thank you. We greatly appreciate the very close working relationship we have with the Northeast Bottled Water Association, and appreciate all the assistance that you provide on the issues in this region. And we look forward to working with all of you in the future on the important issues facing the bottled water industry. And I think working together, we can certainly continue to do good things and accomplish our mutual goals. So that is all I have, and I would be glad to answer any questions anybody might have. I should stop my sharing, I guess, so I can see everybody.
There we go. Thank you, Joe. That was an excellent overview and presentation of all the hard work that IBWA has been doing throughout the year. I know for me, who's been involved in keeping up to date on all the regulations going on throughout the country, it's crazy to see that as much as some state governments have been shut down and that they're not in their offices, they certainly haven't slowed down on, pushing through or keeping active on some of these regulations that we've been talking about. even since last year, as far as recycled content mandates or plastic bans and things like that. So it's, things that we all have to continue to stay on top of. So thank you for the updates on all of that. If anyone has any questions for Joe, we certainly have a few more minutes for that. You could feel free to unmute yourself, or if you are unable to due to background noise, you can certainly put it in the chat box or the Q&A.
I see someone has asked a question about creating a new membership category for regional association presidents. I think that what we've tried to do is have that be the regional association, state and regional association committee at IBWA. I guess the one thing that sometimes does happen is that those meetings are typically only for IBWA members, and sometimes the various presidents of some of the associations are not IBWA members, and therefore that particular person might not be able to participate, but we then allow any other representative from a state and regional association to take part in that state and regional association committee meeting. Okay, I don't see anything more in the chat box. So.
There's nothing popping up in the Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for Joe? If not, we'll get our next presenter ready to go, which will be Chris Dunn.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much, Joe. Enjoy your weekend.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to continue to hang around and listen to some more of these good presentations.
Great, thank you.
Joe Doss for president.
I have a quick question for Joe. Have you been working with the bottle suppliers? Are they preparing for this recycled content? Some of the figures are pretty aggressive in how quickly they're going to change, or they're requiring the change.
When you say the suppliers of bottles, the suppliers of recycled material, we have had conversations with those folks. Of course, they want there to be very high recycled content rates so they can sell more product, quite frankly, which we don't think is available. And so when you said bottle suppliers, I want to make sure I understand who you're referring to.
Bottle manufacturers, for the smaller bottles, if the bottler doesn't blow their own, not just the resin, but the bottle manufacturers.
Right, and it's clearly going to be, an issue if there is not enough material to make the recycled content to meet those requirements. And obviously there are some companies that are not blowing their own, and they're going to have to purchase those bottles from bottle manufacturers. And of course, it's probably going to be more expensive to do that. And of course, that's one of the things that's going on here, is that right now it is more cost effective in many cases to just use virgin material because it's cheaper. And again, that's why some of these groups are saying, well, if we mandate it, then you're going to have to use it, regardless of whether it's cheaper or not. And I think that's been what's happening in a lot of places is, the virgin material is cheaper. And so companies will buy the virgin material. So there are a lot of different things that go on. But to answer specifically your question, I don't think we've had contact specifically with bottle companies that are making the bottles directly. But we're just definitely having contacts with the folks that are responsible for getting the recycled material produced, because it's key to have conversations with them and let them know that we don't think that the proposals that they are supporting are able to be met. That's the bottom line, is that we just don't think there's enough to go on to be able to be available, not just from the the mandates, but more and more companies, large companies, are making their own commitments to using recycled content material, which again takes a lot of recycled material. We just recently did a study to show the availability or lack thereof of rPET and rHDP. And that information will help us as we talk to various state legislators. And there's also a model there, a template that we can use on a state-by-state basis to show what that individual situation is in that state.
Joe, this is Chris. Does any of these recycled content regulations apply to the plastic wrap that are used to shrink wrap cases?
At this point, it seems to be focused on, if you're talking about recycled content of the bottle, it's focused on the bottle, not the outer packaging of the wrap or anything at this point. Now, I think that those things would be covered by EPR proposals when you have to reduce your overall plastic consumption.